Thank you all so much. It's great to be in the great city of Harlingen again, and with joining us with so many mayors. And this Mayor's Alliance really warms my heart, coming from Washington, D.C., and living in some of the most divisive times in American history. And I mean that literally. So coming home and seeing everybody working together, and mayors from across the region taking this alliance seriously really is such a great thing for our region. And I would say when people are when we're in Washington, nobody differentiates McAllen from Harlingen from Brownsville. They just see us as a region, and it's important that we see each other that way. And historically, we've worked together. Members of Congress from the region have worked together closely because what's good for one is good for all of us. And so we've been able to do a lot of things regionally, and I think we need to continue working that way. Everything south of San Antonio to a lot of people is the Rio Grande Valley. And I think that y'all working together and certainly coming up and visiting us in Washington and talking about the issues that are important to y'all and getting in front of people and agencies. And I know recently we've hosted the city of Brownsville, and we've hosted a lot of all of you, I think all of y'all at one point or another. So it's great and great to be here. I want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing in Washington and or not doing, right? We're trying to pass a budget that we haven't quite gotten passed. And we got a CR done a few weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, through the House, that we're waiting to see what happens in the Senate. But since I've been in Washington, we've been able to bring almost $8 billion of federal resources to the region. And people say, what do you want to be focused for? So I want to be what do you want to be known for? I want to be known for bringing the money home. And to me, that's the one thing that I think is important to every city, is to have the resources you need for school districts, for infrastructure, for healthcare. I mean, there are so many needs in South Texas that we need to highlight. And I think that's why it's so important to make those trips to Washington, and for us, obviously, to be engaged here with you. But I want to talk a little bit about the budget and the big bad bill, right? The big bad bill that we voted for recently, that I voted against it, but it passed the House, and it has some significant impacts here in the Valley, particularly when it comes to health care. We lose about, when this bill takes effect, we're going to lose about $500 billion in Medicare, and that's health care for senior citizens across the country. And that's not a freebie. It's not a gift. It's not an entitlement. It's something people have been paying for and paying into their entire life. And we lose over a 10-year period, even more than that on Medicaid. Here in the RGV, we have about more than 1 out of 4 households rely on Medicaid. And if you're not on Medicaid and you think, well, I have private insurance, I don't think it affects me. Well, it does. When you strip that much health care out of any community, about $1 trillion nationally, what does it do? Businesses shutter their doors, doctors leave, specialty clinics can't afford to keep their doors open because they lose so much of the market share. And at the end of the day, it impacts healthcare outcomes here in the Valley. It also comes with $300 billion of SNAP. And SNAP is obviously significant here, not only for our food banks, Meals on Wheels for senior citizens, school lunch programs. Sometimes the only meal some kids actually get is at school. That breakfast and that lunch is where they eat. And I thought it was a really mean bill. And I know that that it's touted and sold talking about no tax on tips, or no tax on overtime, or no tax on Social Security, which is false, right? Because there's a tax deduction, but it's your Social Security still gets taxed. But all three of those things that I just mentioned expire in 2028, and so it was a kind of a sales point. But the major tax breaks for the billionaires and multinational corporations, those are permanent. And at the end of the day, over a 10-year period, it'll cost us almost $3 trillion in increasing our national debt. So it has the opposite effect. It doesn't cut costs. At the end of the day, it's to really benefit the ultra wealthy. And I say that it's not the the casual millionaire that has a small mom and pop business that's been working all their life or for generations to build a little capital. These are the largest, most wealthy people. We probably have one constituent in the RGB that qualifies for those tax breaks, right? We all know who that is. So at the end of the day, those are things that we need to push back on. I think that still things can change and we can fix a lot of this, but it's important for us to engage members of Congress, our U.S. senators, and come up to D.C. I think y'all had some great visits when y'all been up there, and continue engaging the federal government and assuring that you're in line for those projects. Obviously, any kind of federal grant that y'all apply for, let us know if you're in my district or not. I know we have a few mayors that are like right outside of our district. It doesn't matter. Call us. Let us know. Let us write a letter of support for any kind of federal funding that you're requesting, and we want to be helpful. We want to be helpful in ensuring that we have all the resources we can bring down to the valley, and that we continue to grow and prosper. I'm very proud to represent Harlingen, and Mayor Sepulveda has done an amazing job. I just heard over $250 million in new building permits for the city. We're done this year, and the year's not over yet, right? So great things are happening in Harlingen and across the Rio Grande Valley. I have a lot to brag about back in DC, because even in times like now, when it feels that things are starting to stagnate a little bit or there's less growth, the RGV is still growing, and we're still prospering, and investment is still coming. But we have work to do. I'm happy to see that the border is under control. I was one of the most critical Democrats in the country on the Biden administration because I thought the border was out of control, and it seems to be a pretty quiet place these days. And I think that we should all be happy for that. But at the same time, I don't agree with people with masks on their face and unmarked cars nabbing people off the streets of America the way we've seen recently. And our border crossings are down about 30% across the border. And 30% is significant. And that's something that we need to continue urging the administration to kind of lighten up and allow people to cross freely, good people that have already been vetted through embassies and consulates around the world that we know come in here and spend money and invest and are very important and part of our economy. We need to be able to send that message to Mexican nationals who we know who have made significant investments in our banks and construction and development, especially Padre Island and all throughout the valley, business owners. We need to have a policy that welcomes them. The small city of McAllen of 130,000 people gets almost $2 billion a year of Mexican national deposits into our banks. And that's money that's invested and reinvested, money that we borrow. And we should be welcoming that type of foreign investment and have policies in place that welcome them. The Canadian travel is way down as well. European travel is down 12%, which is significant. People say, oh, it's only 12%. It translates to billions and billions of dollars. And I think those are the places that we should be having honest conversations with our friends across the aisle and find common ground and assuring that we nurture an environment that is business friendly. We definitely should not allow criminals to come into our country. In fact, we should deport every single criminal we can find in this country. But there's a lot of good people that are here, and we need to find a pathway for them to stay and work. I'm working on a bill called the Save the American Workforce Act, which creates a pathway for people who have been here 5 years or longer and have never had a criminal or legal problem in the United States, where their employer can sponsor them to stay for 1 year at a time. And I think this will help, especially alleviate some of the workforce issues here in the Rio Grande Valley and across the state and across the country, really. But a lot of the hardest work in America is done by immigrant labor, and the vast majority of them are not criminals. They're hardworking people, and we need to find a pathway. I just had an event about a month ago with the farming community in my district, and these were 100% strong supporters of this administration, but they weren't expecting two things. They weren't expecting the labor shortage that they have now that doesn't allow them to even harvest the crops that they're farming, and they weren't expecting the tariffs that are preventing them from selling their products to those markets, and they're hurting. And when they're hurting, we're all hurting because they're an intricate and important part of our economy. The construction industry also has been heavily impacted here in South Texas. When we don't have enough labor to actually build homes or build buildings at the rate that we were doing prior to this policy taking place. Restaurants, hotels. I think if you go to the chamber, you'll find all types of businesses that rely on labor. And a lot of that labor, the people that have been here for 20 or 30 years that don't have a legal status, we need to find a pathway for them to be here legally, pay taxes, pay Social Security, and really get them out of the shadows. And these are people that we know. Sometimes we've known them for decades and we don't realize that they don't have a legal status. But right now, people are living scared. And it's not just the workers, it's also the businesses. Our farming community is especially concerned because a lot of the harvest workers were living on these farms. They stay in the little casitas while they're doing the work. Well, since we recently had that case with that bakery in Los Fresnos, where if you give them housing, if they sleep in your place and you sleep in your property, you can be charged with harboring. And it's a felony that carries years of jail time. And I don't think, they would pick workers and take them. But if you give them housing or you're transporting them, you can be charged with a federal felony. And they were just charged with that. They were just charged and found guilty. And I think it's on appeal right now, but they were found guilty. And it's really got farmers pretty spooked, not only here, but across the country. I met with them in Washington, and they're really worried because the harvest workers that move with the harvest around the country usually are housed. Part of the deal is that they're housed at these farms, and farmers are now very concerned about providing housing for workers, which makes it much more costly for them and for the workers when they can't do that because they're concerned about being charged with a federal offense. These are all really, really important topics that are on the top of a lot of people's minds, especially here in South Texas. We need to be talking to our members of Congress. We need to be talking to senators here and across the country through associations, obviously through cities and counties and organizations. But we need to make sure that the business community is communicating this. A lot of times when we talk about it from the immigrant perspective or the migrant perspective, that, hey, we're dividing families when we're ripping people out the streets and out of the country, it's stigmatized and it doesn't really get the sympathy that it deserves. But when you talk about it affecting business, it really changes people's perspective. And I noticed that. And I think that's kind of the way we got to think about things. And I could tell you, since I got to Congress, I've been very engaged in battling the cartel problem in Mexico. And we have a bipartisan group of members in Congress that convene regularly to see what policies we could put in place to help us with that issue. And I always tell the story that in the last 8 to 10 years, more Mexican nationals have died to cartel violence than we've lost soldiers in every war from Korea to today. Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, every military conflict that this country has gone through from the Korean War to today has resulted in less soldiers dying than Mexican nationals have died across the border just from the violence of organized crime. And that didn't really resonate much. But when we started talking about our businesses being taxed by cartels across the border, all throughout Mexico, not just on the border, that really resonated. And people said, wait a minute, so there's really not free trade? I said, no, not completely, because we're no longer, a lot of our trade doesn't pay the Mexican government a tax, but they're paying cartels to get their products and services to their final destination. And that really had an impact, and it really perked people up. So sometimes it's not the people who are hurt the most that the story that sells and resonates with people. Sometimes it's talking about the impact that it has on just regular businesses across the country. And we need to find those little niches of information that really help us sell it. And I think when we talk to Senator Cornyn or Senator Cruz, those are the issues that I think that we need to talk about is, hey, it's hurting business. The lack of labor is hurting business. The cartel problem across the border is hurting business. And there are a lot of people in Washington that really care about those issues. And I think it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, that is a problem, and it's an American problem. It's not a Democratic or Republican problem, and it really requires bipartisan solutions to fix them. And so we're going to keep working. I have to head out to the airport right now and fly out, but I wanted to be here and say hi to everybody, tell y'all that anything we could do for y'all, our doors are always open here and in Washington. Laura Matamoros is my district director. She's here at our main office in Brownsville, and anything that we could ever do for y'all, we're ready and willing to work. So, and I'll open it up to any questions somebody may have, or if the press has any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Carlos, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for all that you do for us here at DC, for Wheaton. I actually just wanted to ask, I should know this, but what is it, this redistricting that's happened, right? Go, your district is Spain.
Yeah.
So when does that actually take effect?
Yes.
And I just wanted to ask because...
Well, I'm going to keep representing you to the last day, the last minute of the last day, right? and that's... That's right. So let's talk about that a little bit. So we got redistricted. Under the new map, I lost all of Hidalgo County, which is really painful because that's been my base for a long time, and that's where I live, and that's where I've worked for many years. But under this new map, we lose Hidalgo County, and we go into Nueces County. I get up 82% of the new map takes us into Nueces County. It's final in terms of it's been approved by the state legislature, but there's a lawsuit that's filed, and there's a hearing. There's a litigation process that's taking place the first week of October, and it's supposed to last 10 days. And there seems to be optimism that there's a potential opportunity where the state is enjoined from changing the maps. And if that happens, then we'll probably be in the same maps for at least one more cycle. Let's keep our fingers crossed that happens. Unfortunately, I'm not very optimistic that that's going to happen, right? So I'm already spending time in Corpus, which was my hometown where I was born and raised, and I'm campaigning out there, and we're getting ready for another cycle. But we're going to keep taking care of everybody that we've been taking care of. And even if the maps change and we get elected under these new maps, know that you have a friend and that you can call me for anything, and we're ready to help in any way we can. And as I said, I know Mission's a little out of my district, but if Mission needs anything, give us a call. And we want to be helpful. We want to be able to get on letters. We want to be able to write letters. We want to be as supportive as possible and assure that everybody is successful. And there's still a little uncertainty, but by the end of October, even the litigation portion of it will be finalized and it'll be over. There's a 3-judge panel from the Fifth Circuit that's hearing this case. It's 1 Democrat and 2 Republicans. There was a status conference recently, and one of the Republicans was very critical of the state and DOJ of the lawsuit that they filed because they pled the exact opposite of what they were saying in the litigation that was existing on the maps that had been drawn in 2020, that they said they weren't gerrymandered based on race and race. They're racially neutral, and now under what DOJ just sent them, they're actually alleging that hey, race was used and we gerrymandered these seats and we need to fix them. So this federal judge, 79-year-old federal judge that was appointed by Ronald Reagan, is being very critical of the state and DOJ in that lawsuit. And there was some optimism by a lawyer who's usually pretty pessimistic about the process, that they think that there's a good shot that there could be an injunction granted. And if that were the case, here we are, right? We stay where we are, and hopefully. But unfortunately, I'm not that optimistic. I still think more than likely the maps will stay. And it'll go, if it gets appealed, it gets appealed straight to the Supreme Court from that 3-court panel. Now, the judges did say that they would rule before filing deadline. So they're not going to let this drag out. I know in 2012, it dragged out till May. I mean, they actually had to move the primary elections to May, which most incumbents do not like, right? You want to get your election done as soon as possible. And that's actually how Ted Cruz got elected during that period. He had more time to campaign against Dewhurst and raise resources, and it can change a lot of outcomes of races around the state. I don't think that's going to happen. The judges have signaled that it won't, but it can go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court could potentially rule on it as well later on. That could change the election. But as I said, I'm not optimistic. I'm going to stay on the ground and keep working.